The incident occurred on a Tuesday, just before midnight, under the sterile, buzzing fluorescent lights of a 24-hour gas station on the city's east side. Sergeant Elias Kingston, a 20-year veteran of the force and the newly appointed, albeit undercover, chief of the Internal Affairs Bureau, was stopped while filling the tank of his personal, unmarked sedan. The officer who initiated the stop was Patrolman Dale Calloway, badge number 4815, a man with 3 years on the job and 4 excessive force complaints already under review. Calloway's stated reason for the stop was that Sergeant Kingston's vehicle, a 10-year-old gray sedan, matched the description of a car used in a convenience store robbery 3 miles away. What followed was a textbook case of racial profiling escalated by ego, a confrontation where a patrolman, dripping with condescension and armed with a badge, pinned a man against his own car, completely unaware he was attempting to intimidate and arrest the very man tasked with policing the police. This is the bodycam footage, the witness testimony, and the official record of the moment Officer Calloway's career ended. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of gasoline and damp asphalt. Elias Kingston watched the numbers on the pump click upward, his mind 1,000 miles away, sorting through the details of the corruption case he was building against a ring of officers in the narcotics division. He wore what he always wore for these deep cover operations, a plain black hoodie, worn jeans, and scuffed work boots. He was a ghost, a man who had deliberately erased his high rank from his physical presence to move unseen through the city he was sworn to protect. The sudden glare of red and blue lights flashing across the gas station's concrete apron pulled him back to reality. A patrol car had swung into the lot, parking at an aggressive angle behind his sedan, effectively blocking him in. Elias felt a familiar, weary tightening in his gut. He didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the pump, his hands visible, one resting on the roof of his car, the other holding the gas nozzle. He knew the drill. He'd lived it 100 times before he'd ever pinned on a badge, and he'd seen it 1,000 times since. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps crunched on stray gravel. Evening. A voice barked, too loud, too sharp for a simple greeting. Gonna need you to step away from the vehicle. Elias finished fueling, letting the pump click off. He carefully replaced the nozzle and twisted the gas cap back on, his movements slow and deliberate. Only then did he turn. Officer Calloway stood a few feet away, hand resting casually on the butt of his holstered firearm. He was young, with a hard set to his jaw and an impatient, challenging look in his eyes that Elias recognized instantly. It was the look of a man who saw a uniform not as a responsibility, but as a license. "Is there a problem, officer?" Elias asked, his voice even and calm. "That's what I'm here to find out," Calloway sneered. The timestamp on his bodycam footage read 23 hours, 47 minutes, and 12 seconds. "This your car?" Elias nodded. "Registered to me?" "Yes, license and registration." It wasn't a request. Calloway's gaze flickered from Elias's face to his hands, then swept over the old sedan with dismissive contempt. The car was part of his cover, unassuming, slightly battered, the kind of vehicle that blended into the background. To Calloway, it was just another piece of a puzzle that his prejudice had already solved. Elias reached slowly for his back pocket. "My wallet is in my back right pocket. My registration is in the glove box. Would you like me to get it?" he asked, telegraphing every movement. Calloway's posture stiffened. "Just the license for now. And keep your hands where I can see them." Elias carefully retrieved his wallet, extracted his driver's license, and held it out. The officer snatched it from his fingers, his eyes never leaving Elias's face. He walked back to his cruiser, the beam of his flashlight dancing over the license before he ducked inside. Through the windshield, Elias could see him speaking into his radio, the silhouette of his head backlit by the glow of his onboard computer. A few minutes stretched into an eternity. Another customer, a man in a trucker hat, finished paying inside the convenience store and walked toward his rig, his pace slowing as he took in the scene. He gave Elias a wide berth, a flicker of curiosity and caution in his eyes. Inside the store, the young clerk peered over the counter, his face framed by the window. Elias stood still, a statue of patience. He knew his license would come back clean. He had no warrants, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket in the last decade. But he also knew that for an officer like Calloway, Clean facts were often just an inconvenient obstacle to a pre-written narrative. The patrol car door opened again. Calloway emerged, a slight frown on his face. The clean record hadn't fit his theory. Now he needed a new one. He strode back toward Elias, handing the license back, but not stepping away. He was crowding him, using his physical presence to intimidate. "Name's Elias Kingston," Calloway said, as if reading from a script. "Address on the west side." "What are you doing over here on the east end so late at night?" "Getting gas, officer," Elias replied, his voice still level. "This station has the best price in the city." It was a simple, truthful answer. It was also, in Calloway's mind, an evasive one. The officer's eyes narrowed. "You know, a car just like this was involved in an armed robbery about 20 minutes ago. Convenience store over on Elm Street. Suspect was a black male, wearing a dark hoodie." He gestured vaguely toward Elias's own black hoodie. The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It was the oldest, flimsiest pretext in the book, and Elias felt a cold anger mix with his professional weariness. He had seen this tactic ruin lives, turn a simple traffic stop into a nightmare of false charges and legal battles. "I've been on the other side of town for the past 3 hours, officer," Elias stated calmly. "In a meeting. I have about a dozen witnesses who can attest to that." Calloway laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Oh, I bet you do. A dozen of your buddies, right? You're going to have to do better than that. Turn around. Place your hands on the roof of the car." The command was a clear escalation, a crossing of a line from investigatory stop to detention. Elias knew his rights better than Calloway ever would. He knew this was an unlawful search, a fishing expedition born of pure bias. "Officer, you have no probable cause for a search," he said, his voice dropping slightly, gaining a new edge of authority. "I do not consent to any searches." The legal phrase, spoken with such calm precision, seemed to enrage Calloway. His face flushed. "You don't consent? I'm not asking for your consent. Your vehicle and your description match that of an armed and dangerous felon. That gives me all the probable cause I need. Now turn around before I make you turn around." The threat was naked, the promise of violence clear. From the corner of his eye, Elias saw the trucker freeze by his rig, his hand now holding a phone. The clerk inside the store had also pulled out his phone. They were witnesses. They were the jury. Elias made a calculated decision. He could force the issue, refuse the unlawful order, and risk Calloway escalating to physical violence right here and now. Or he could comply, let the officer dig his own grave, and document every violation for the reckoning to come. He chose the latter. Slowly, he turned and placed his hands flat on the roof of his sedan. The metal was cool beneath his palms. "I am complying under duress," he said, his voice clear and loud enough for any recording device to pick up. "I am stating for the record that this is an illegal search." Calloway shoved him forward, slamming his chest against the car. "Just shut up and let me do my job, lawyer." The officer's hands were rough, unprofessional. He ran them down Elias's sides, slapping his pockets, his movements designed to humiliate as much as to search. He found nothing in the jeans. He moved up to the hoodie. His hand brushed against the hard, metallic object clipped to Elias's belt beneath the fabric. Calloway froze. "What's this?" he hissed, his voice suddenly tight with a mixture of fear and excitement. He ripped the hoodie up, exposing the grip of a standard-issue Glock 19 nestled in a concealed holster. "Gun!" Calloway screamed, shoving Elias hard against the car and stumbling backward, his own weapon flying out of its holster and into his hand with practiced speed. "On the ground. Get on the ground now. Hands behind your head. Do it." The scene exploded into high alert. The trucker ducked behind his rig. The clerk inside the store dropped his phone and vanished below the counter. The night, which had been still and quiet, was now screaming with tension. Elias did not move. He kept his hands on the roof of the car, his posture unchanged. He did not get on the ground. He turned his head slowly, meeting the officer's wide, panicked eyes over his shoulder. The barrel of Calloway's pistol was trembling slightly. "Officer Calloway," Elias said, and his voice was no longer calm. It was a blade of ice. It was the voice of pure, undiluted command. "You need to lower your weapon. Right now." "I said get on the ground." Calloway shrieked, his finger tightening on the trigger. "One more word, and I will shoot you." Elias ignored the threat. He had faced down men far more dangerous than this jumped-up patrolman. "My name," he said, enunciating each word with chilling clarity, "is Sergeant Elias Kingston. Badge number 722. I am the acting chief of the Internal Affairs Bureau for this city's police department." A beat of silence. Calloway's face contorted in disbelief, then twisted into a derisive sneer. "You think I'm an idiot? You're a felon with an illegal firearm, and now you're impersonating an officer. You just bought yourself 20 years." He was doubling down, his ego refusing to accept the possibility that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. "My service weapon is legally registered to me and the department," Elias continued, his voice cutting through Calloway's tirade. "My credentials are in my front left jacket pocket. You will also find a department-issued burner phone. If you check your department directory, which I suggest you do immediately, you will find my name and badge number listed. However, my current assignment is classified." The level of detail, the sheer unshakable confidence in his tone, finally planted a seed of doubt in Calloway's mind. The barrel of his gun wavered. The name Kingston was not unfamiliar. It was a name whispered with a mixture of respect and fear in the locker rooms. The ghost. The guy who took down dirty cops. But it couldn't be him. Not this man, in this car, in this hoodie. "You're lying," Calloway stammered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. It was a question now, not a statement. "Am I?" Elias asked softly. "Let's find out. I want you to get on your radio. I want you to call your direct supervisor. That would be Captain Robert Hayes, would it not? Tell Captain Hayes that you have Sergeant Kingston at the corner of Midland and 4th. Use my name. Tell him it's an urgent 10 to 36. And then, Officer Calloway, you and I will have a conversation with him about your definition of probable cause." The use of the captain's full name, the casual, authoritative way he spoke it, was like a physical blow. It was information a common criminal would not have. It was the kind of detail that shattered Calloway's reality. The blood drained from the officer's face, replaced by a pasty, sickly white. The bodycam footage would later show his pupils dilating, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. The swagger, the aggression, the certainty, it all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind a terrified young man holding a gun on his own superior officer. His hand trembled violently now. He slowly, shakily, lowered his weapon. What did you say your name was?" he whispered, the question pathetic. Elias finally took his hands off the car and turned to face him fully. He stood to his full height, and suddenly, he no longer looked like a suspect. He looked like the most powerful man Calloway had ever met. The hoodie and jeans seemed to melt away, replaced by an aura of immense, unassailable authority. "I'm the man who's going to read your final report, officer," Elias said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Now make the call." Calloway fumbled for the radio on his shoulder, his fingers clumsy and useless. He dropped it. It clattered on the pavement, the sound echoing in the sudden, profound silence. He stared at it, then back at Elias, his expression one of pure, abject horror. He had not just made a mistake, he had committed career suicide, and the camera on his own chest was recording every second of it for the prosecution. The arrival of Captain Hayes's cruiser was a blur of screeching tires and flashing lights, a stark contrast to Calloway's earlier, arrogant entrance. Hayes, a stout man with graying hair and a perpetually worried expression, burst from his car before it had even fully stopped. He took one look at the scene, at Elias Kingston standing calmly by his sedan, and at Dale Calloway, who looked like he was about to collapse, and his face went ashen. He knew Kingston. Not well, but he knew the reputation. The man was a legend in IAD, a surgeon who cut corruption out of the department with cold, terrifying precision. To find him here, in a standoff with one of his own rookies, was a nightmare scenario. "Sergeant Kingston, sir," Hayes stammered, rushing forward. "What's going on here? Is everything all right?" His eyes darted to Calloway, a silent, frantic question in them. Elias didn't even glance at the captain. His gaze was locked on Calloway, who was now visibly trembling, his weapon holstered but his hand still resting on it, as if for comfort. "Your officer was just explaining his novel interpretation of the Fourth Amendment to me, Captain," Elias said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He initiated a stop without reasonable suspicion, conducted an illegal search based on a fabricated pretext, and then drew his weapon on me after discovering my legally carried service firearm. He also accused me of impersonating an officer. Other than that, it's been a quiet evening. Each sentence landed like a hammer blow. Hayes looked from Elias to Calloway and back again, his face a mask of dawning dread. He understood the implications immediately. This wasn't just a bad stop. This was a department-ending, city lawsuit-level catastrophe. Dale, Hayes choked out, his voice barely a whisper. What did you do? Calloway couldn't speak. He just shook his head, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish out of water. The bravado he'd worn like armor was gone, stripped away to reveal the panicked, prejudiced man underneath. The trucker had emerged from behind his rig now, his phone still held up, recording. He was close enough to hear every word. The clerk had reappeared behind the convenience store window, his own phone also aimed at the unfolding drama. The public record was being written in real time. Elias finally turned his attention to Hayes. Captain, I want your officer's weapon. And his badge. I want him placed in the back of your vehicle. He is to have no further communication with anyone until I say so. You will secure his body camera and mark it as evidence in an active internal affairs investigation. The file number is 88K14. Is that understood? The file number was a fabrication, but it sounded official enough to shock Hayes into compliance. The captain, a man who commanded hundreds of officers, snapped into action as if he were the rookie. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. He turned to Calloway, his expression a mixture of fury and despair. Dale, give me your weapon. Now Calloway looked at his captain as if seeing a ghost. He unclipped his holster and handed the entire rig over, his movements slow and robotic. Then he unclipped his badge. The piece of metal, his symbol of authority, seemed to mock him as he passed it to Hayes. In the car, Dale. Not a word. Hayes commanded, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. He shoved the disgraced officer toward the back of his cruiser and locked him inside. He then walked over, collected Calloway's fallen radio, and secured the body camera from his chest. He handled it like it was a live grenade. He brought the items to Elias. Sir, I am so sorry. I don't know what to say. He's a young officer. He's a liability, Captain. Elias cut him off, his tone sharp. He's a lawsuit waiting to happen, and tonight, it happened. Your officer saw a black man in a hoodie at a gas station and decided he was a criminal. He ignored every sign that he was wrong, and he escalated the situation until he had his gun pointed at my chest. What if I hadn't been a cop, Captain? What if I had been a plumber, a teacher, a regular citizen who knew his rights? Would he be dead right now? The questions hung in the cold night air, unanswerable and damning. Hayes flinched as if he'd been struck. Sir, this isn't on you, Robert, Elias said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly as he used the captain's first name again. But cleaning it up is. I want a full report on my desk by 0800. I want every piece of dashcam and bodycam footage from this incident. I want Calloway's complete file, including the 4 excessive force complaints that I know for a fact are sitting on someone's desk. Unresolved, Hayes's eyes widened. Of course Kingston knew about the complaints. It was his job to know. Yes, Sergeant. You'll have it all, Elias nodded, a final, dismissive gesture. Good. Now secure this scene. I have a corruption case to get back to, without another word. He turned, got into his old gray sedan, and started the engine. As he pulled out of the gas station, he saw the trucker give him a slow, deliberate nod of respect. He saw the clerk give a thumbs up through the window. He didn't acknowledge them. There was no victory here. There was only the grim, exhausting confirmation of a sickness he was trying to cure from within, a sickness that had almost made him its victim. The fallout was swift and brutal. The video from the trucker's phone hit social media before Captain Hayes had even finished driving a silent, shattered Dale Calloway back to the precinct. By morning, it was the #1 trending topic in the country. The headline was incendiary and accurate. Racist cop pulls gun on undercover IAD chief. The police department's communications office went into immediate crisis mode, but there was nothing to spin. The evidence was irrefutable, captured on Calloway's own camera. The raw footage was even more damning than the cell phone video. It captured every sneer, every condescending word, every illegal action Calloway took. It showed his panic, his disbelief, and his ultimate, pathetic collapse. The public outcry was deafening. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters, holding signs with Calloway's face on them next to slogans demanding accountability. The mayor held a press conference, flanked by a grim-faced police commissioner, promising a full and transparent investigation. It was a promise Elias Kingston intended to make them keep. Dale Calloway was suspended without pay that morning. By the end of the week, following an expedited internal affairs review led by Kingston himself, he was fired. The police union filed a grievance, as they always did, but even they knew it was a losing battle. The evidence was too overwhelming. Calloway was not just fired, he was made an example of. The district attorney, facing public pressure, announced they were reviewing the case for potential criminal charges, including aggravated assault and official oppression. In his office, surrounded by stacks of files, Elias Kingston watched the news reports with a heavy heart. He took no pleasure in Calloway's downfall. The young man's life was ruined, his future shattered, but it was a ruin of his own making. For Elias, Calloway was not an individual monster. He was a symptom of a systemic disease. He was the product of a culture that too often trained its officers to see certain communities not as citizens to be protected, but as threats to be neutralized. His prejudice was not an anomaly. It was a reflection of biases that were baked into the very foundations of the institution. A few weeks later, the city settled a massive civil rights lawsuit filed by a national advocacy group on behalf of the unnamed citizen who had been profiled. The settlement included a multi-million-dollar payment and, more importantly, a consent decree mandating sweeping reforms to the department's training on implicit bias, de-escalation, and use of force. Elias was instrumental in drafting the terms of that decree. He worked from the inside, using the power Calloway had so foolishly challenged to force the change he knew was desperately needed. He never spoke to Dale Calloway again. He saw him one last time, months later, on a local news broadcast. Calloway was leaving a courthouse, having pleaded guilty to lesser charges to avoid prison time. He looked gaunt, broken. He was no longer a symbol of arrogant power, but a cautionary tale. He was gone forever from the world of law enforcement, a ghost haunting the careers of any officer who thought a badge gave them the right to see color before they saw humanity. For Elias Kingston, the work continued. The Calloway file was closed, but a dozen more were open on his desk. Each one represented another officer who had betrayed their oath, another crack in the foundation he was trying to rebuild. The night at the gas station had been a stark reminder of the stakes. He wasn't just fighting a corrupt system. He was fighting for a world where a black man in a hoodie could buy gas at night without having to prove his right to exist. It was a long, hard fight, but as he picked up the next file, he knew, with a weary and unshakable certainty, that it was a fight he would never, ever give up.